I'm Bouhelier-Gautreau, Senior Investment Associate at Kingscrowd, and we invested back in April 2026 in your company. I led the deal. I'm very excited about what you're doing, and you're here today with us to kind of tell us more about your company. Why is this an interesting investment opportunity? And on my side, I'm going to share what's the analysis that I've been doing and led us to pretty strongly want to invest into your business. So, Del, what about you just give us a quick intro of yourself right now?
Lovely. First of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. We're so impressed by the impact of Kingscrowd evaluation on the space. I'm getting lots of calls with existing investors for Harmony, and they always talking about you guys. So it's pretty cool. So it's a great opportunity to be here. So thank you for having me. So in short, myself, I'm a pharmacist by training with a master's degree in food science and technology that started a career as a researcher. And very early on time, I learned that I was a bad researcher, even though I loved the science. And I moved myself to the business side of things. And I primarily got in love with the idea of inserting innovation in the market. How do you actually translate science into consumer products? And I also got in love with the baby nutrition space since in the very beginning when I was actually a grad student. So I got sucked in with this idea that infant nutrition needs a big transformation. And I got doing this kind of work for about 20 years already. So anything from lab to market. So over this 20-something years, we launched, 30-something products, filed lots of patents, book chapters, articles, lots of things in this space. But I'll say my forte is really the interactions with consumers. And once again, how do you introduce a science-based product to, babies and parents that need this kind of innovation. So that's what we're doing for so many years. And that's like a long-time passion for sure.
You're talking about you doing this, being in the space since you were a grad student, so quite some time already. Sorry to break the news, Del. And one thing that really fascinates me is that people in the healthcare biotech space, usually before they launch an idea, they already have sometimes a career or they've been studying for a long time. They know the topic, right? We're not talking about just kind of a easier software type of startup to do. Usually have people with a deep background, and you're focusing on the infant nutrition space, which at the same time is a space where industries are not really taking risk, and parents don't really want to take a lot of risk either. I mean, of course, depending on the parents, right? But once you kind of find a product, it's difficult to switch it, and you want to really trust the brand. So what kind of motivated you? What did you find in this industry that really made you want to launch a product like Melody, to build a company like Harmony Baby Nutrition? What is your experience? How is it helping you actually launch such a product in the market that is sometimes just a little bit complicated between regulations and customer behavior?
All right, there is a lot in your question.
There is a lot in my question.
To answer, based on my personal and professional experience on that, right? And I think the most compelling story behind that was the time when we had our second baby out of 3 babies that was born here in the Boston area. So on that time, I was doing an MBA program at MIT. So I was really surrounded by all kinds of innovation and science, robotics, AI, all kinds of things. And I got myself thinking inside a class that was called commercializing science, about how we can introduce innovation in some specific industries. And of course, I'm someone that grew up in the infant nutrition space. And we thought about doing this innovative product that now it's called Harmony, right? And I wrote this class project about using biotechnology to make the human milk components and make baby formulas out of those. Some sort of like, on quotes, a synthetic human milk. That was like the core of the idea. And we wrote this project as like a class project. It was super cool. We got awards. We got, quite nice recognition about it. But that was not a business. It was a class project, right? So coming back to the point that my daughter was born in the Boston area as soon as I graduated, that was the point that we were struggling really bad as parents, right? Because we thought that breastfeeding was going to be easy, as it was for the first baby. And this time, that was not the reality. My wife went through a super serious postpartum depression, and she was just not producing enough milk. And we introduced a formula to supplement and hoping that the baby gonna start thriving again. And she got like that was like the beginning of a nightmare kind of situation. And we quickly realized that she was actually an allergic baby, the same kind of babies we used to treat many years before. And the pediatrician came to me to say, Dad, now it's time to talk about infant nutrition products and formulas for allergic babies, and gave us a couple samples of these products. And I drove back home, and I was the one actually preparing the very first bottle to my daughter. So when I've done that, of course, I tried that. And as you probably know, formulas especially for allergic babies, are just like awful. They smells and taste pretty gross. It's just like, it's not acceptable. And I was, shaking up that bottle and reading the label to notice that, now as a technical background I have on the things, right, doing the math to understand what is in it is just like, oh, so terrible. And I'm always saying this, a 3-month-old baby on a hypoallergenic formula will have 85 grams of industrial added sugar per day. Just like unbelievable. So those things was actually coming together in the way that was like the last drop for me. Say, listen, I know about these things. I've done these things before. The time is now. If I do not do this, I'm going to regret. So that class project became now the business that's called Harmony. And what we do, we just using human milk components and using like biotechnology that's out there in the space for many years to kind of, really put infant nutrition in a different space. We call like the next generation of infant nutrition products that will be made out of human milk components instead of cow's milk. So it's a bit of like a personal and professional experience. But you asked me about what I've seen in the industry. This is a pretty big industry, getting close to $100 billion, dominated by very few players, like big global players. And I always say with like lacking of innovation. We see some incremental innovation, some ingredients here, some ingredients there over the last 50, 17 years, but not something that's really different, right? Baby formulas are primarily cow's milk powder in a can, and cow's milk is very different than human milk. And it makes no sense. That's the point you're always making. To provide cow's milk as the sole source of nutrition for human babies with the innovation science we know at this point. So we can do much better. The game we're playing is not really to replace breastfeeding. We can't. It's such a complex product, right? Mm-hmm. Breast milk is like a gut-given thing. It's really impressive. It changes over time. It's a super complex system, right? A system within the system within the system. That's the way the researchers kind of qualify that now. There is no science at this point that we can replace that. What we can do, though, is actually shrink the gap between what's a formula-fed baby and what's a breastfed baby using innovation science. That's what we can do. And there is no reason why we're still giving cow's milk to human babies. That's the part that makes no sense. So I'll pause in here.
Yeah, I really think that the experience that you have in this space kind of made you see the problem and maybe give you the courage to also launch that company. And you're using a technology called precision fermentation to build the human milk proteins. And it's not a technology that is new. So what I'm wondering is, why is right now the right time to do this? And why is there not any formula like this on the market?
Yeah, well, personally, I would say that I think we should have done this like many years ago. But I think that the consumer perception, it's totally different at this point. And also the technology is mature. It's very mature. What I mean with this, precision fermentation technology, also called as DNA technology, recombinant proteins technology, is actually not really that new, right? It was created back 35, 40 years ago when we mapped the human DNA. And the first application after mapping the human DNA was actually developing drugs. Because, that's an industry with like pretty big margins that can afford this kind of innovation. This technology evolved over the last 40 years, like a lot. So we can use the same DNA technology to make human milk components at a low cost and pretty big scale. So what we're doing is actually not creating a new technology. We're getting a very safe and well-tested technology from the farmer space and bringing that to the food industry. Infant formula products are actually technically food, but food that we can apply this kind of innovation. Something that's very interesting, Leia, we maybe never discussed that before. People tried doing these things back in time, introducing recombinant proteins in food. But most of the cases, it's very complicated and expensive to do so. Let me give an example. If you want to replicate meat, you're going to come up, meat does have about 30% protein, so super protein concentrated. Fish will have about 20%. Cow's milk is about 4% protein concentrated. Breast milk, though, does have a very low protein concentration. It's less than 1%. Why is it meaningful? Because we don't need to insert lots of proteins to make a product. The cost to introduce a new technology is very small. So that allows us to kind of bring this innovation to a space that traditionally also have much bigger margins than other kind of food in general, right? Baby nutrition products are more close to drugs when it comes to business performance than really regular food. That's why we always saying infant nutrition is ready to disruption. Because of this, it's an industry which is pretty big, good margins, no innovation for many years, and guess what? The cost to introduce a new innovation and introduce kind of this fancy DNA-produced proteins, it's very small. Does it make sense?
It does make sense. And you just say that protein is only 1% of the breast milk. So why does it matter so much to have human-made protein?
Oh, wow. Because human-made proteins have a very important biological role. If you think about breast milk, watch that. Breast milk varies over time from colostrum mature and colostrum transition and mature milk. Guess what? Protein varies a lot. So we have spikes of proteins in the beginning. This protein profile changes in the middle and also changes when the baby is growing. Of course, a baby is different, right? A baby when it's born and a baby of like 1 year is a totally different kind of baby. And those proteins and some special carbs with a couple of, molecules you have, bioactive components, the way we describe them, they play a very important role to protect the baby when the baby is born. All right, another piece of information I feel that's interesting. Human babies are born very immature. What I mean with this, because we stand in two legs, we need to be born very maturely, like almost prematurely compared with other mammals. Think about this, right? A baby cow, we stand up in the same day, start eating grass or whatever in a couple of days. For us as human beings, we take about 6 months to start crawling, to start eating some solid food. So when we were born, lots of like body parts and systems are not fully formed. And that's the point. So breast milk plays a very important role to protect the baby on that, especially in this first 6 months, because lots of things are not working properly yet, like the immune system. And these proteins we have in human milk play a very important role to kind of protect the baby on this phase. When we're using cow's milk proteins, that's not going to work. And actually, that triggers lots of autoimmune reactions that we call allergies. What we do in our harmony is actually using the same proteins we have in human milk to emulate the same mechanism of action breast milk used to protect the baby on that phase. Once again, we're not going to be able to replace breast milk. It's way too complex, but we can definitely emulate some of the mechanisms breast milk does to protect the baby, which is awesome. It's really, really impressive.
So in the discussion we've just had, I heard that you have the experience, you have the passion. That one is pretty easy to see. You have the knowledge, kind of the understanding of how to use this human milk protein, how to add them into the product. The next step for you right now is FDA clearance, right? Working FDA clearance for your Gen 2 and then in the future Gen 3 products. Can you kind of tell us more about what are these products and how are you going to get this clearance?
Yeah, so that's a super important question, because infant nutrition, we always say that infant nutrition is no joke, right? You're dealing with someone else's precious, right? So the level of requirements we have to get a product approved, it's kind of pretty high. It's like thinking about drug development. And another thing, you don't try things on babies. That's it, right? You should have a very strong controlling system to, avoid, harm any baby. That's the point. So regulatory is a very complex process. If you check on Harmony's team, you're going to see regulatory folks like world-renowned regulatory folks because of that. And we have two things that comes together on the regulatory side. We have not only a strong regulatory strategy, and also a pipeline of products, innovation that comes along with that. At this very first phase, we're launching products that are FDA clear, which is awesome. Generation 1, we call those products. We'll be getting those ingredients that are already approved, including some human milk molecules, to make innovative infant formulas. That is the first one we launched, including this product in here I have in my hand. We just came back from Europe, preparing to produce that, called Melody. So it's a FDA cleared baby formula, product formula for babies with allergies and sensitivities, right? This one is clear. Generation 2 kind of products, we get the same matrix like Melody, and we add the first human milk protein in it. That's a new ingredient. For that, we have different regulatory pathways in different countries that's much more open to this kind of innovation than the US at this very moment. Generation 3 kind of products, we replace all kinds of cow's milk ingredients for human milk components. It's like a full complement of human milk components. For those, once again, we do not have in the US at this very moment a clear regulatory pathway to get there. For Generation 1, it's clear. Generation 2, we have a pathway in the US. Generation 3, we do not have that yet. But I can tell you, lots of things are changing. There is a big pressure at this very moment from the industry, from the public and parents for doing this. And a bit of a spoiler, we're waiting for some interesting news from the government, and we actively participating in this kind of discussions, how the US regulatory program is going to be changing in the short term. So that's as much as I can tell you, but wait for that, because things are going to change a lot. There is a big movement now that this country is actually behind on this particular industry, importing products in the black market from Europe and different countries. And there was a very important movement now to change this process. And we're feeling very positive that's going to happen shortly.
Amazing. So you just told us about some sort of your go-to-market strategy, right? First launching Melody, then Gen 2, and then Gen 3 if the regulatory pathway allows it. And I think it's also a smart way for you to be able to fundraise kind of more step by step. And the reason I'm bringing this topic is that usually when I look at startups, one of the biggest risks that I see is the capital risk. Are you going to make progress enough that you're going to be able to raise enough money along the way before you eventually become profitable or become acquired? We see too many companies with great products, great ideas, great go-to-market strategies that just don't succeed to raise the money that they need to raise to grow, and be able to give investors the exit that they'd like to get. So can you kind of tell us what's your fundraising strategies in the short term, but also in the long term, so we can kind of tell investors what to expect on this side?
Yes, interesting. So I think on fundraising, right, and you're 100% right. We're running a biotech business. That's what we're doing here. Harmony is primarily a biotech boutique infant nutrition company, and fundraising is part of the game. So our first phase was really pulling together like a team of stars, researchers, business people, regulatory folks, all of those senior people that want to see a real transformation in this industry. And we have like a pretty solid team. With that, we raised the first $7.5 million in a seed round to do the first science work, IP, regulatory design, all of this, basic work, which we've done for the last 2.5 years, 3 years. So we've done lots of science to build up this pipeline of innovation in science. Now we just start moving to the next phase. For that one, we're still going to need more, rounds of financing to keep going. And the strategy is actually move the first innovations we have to the market, to kind of showcase the science we're doing, bringing products like this one here to the market, that people can see that it's not only a cool innovation, but also there is demand for that. That's really the point. And we want to have the company moving towards like a very strong and solid financial stability. With that, we can have access not only to, venture capital money, but also from like different kind of, financing opportunities that, it's hard for early stage pre-revenue business. So in other words, I'm saying that we've done like very heavy science and IP development up to this point. Now we're moving to commercial to build up more muscles and have be in a better position to keep doing, different financing rounds as much as the company need to keep going all the way towards like an acquisition, which is pretty standard and pretty like hot in the space we are.
And continuing on kind of the fundraising idea, you've raised from pretty impressive VCs in the past. And I know that as investors, social proof is something that we are sensitive to, not only us as institutional investors, but also retail investors a lot. And so can you kind of tell us what convinced these VCs, these institutional investors, to back you?
Well, I think it's exactly the same thing that retail investors, like in crowdfunding systems and platforms, are looking for. They're looking for strong signals of there is a market opportunity out there. There is a demand that people's actually crying for something like this. They're looking for a strong team with expertise in this space that knows what they're talking about. Not only just like, I'll say that sometimes I'm saying that infant nutrition is such an interesting industry there is no space for casual entrepreneurs kind. You must be serious about it. So they're looking for like big marketing opportunity. They're looking for like a very solid team that understand what they're doing and actually does have a very strong commitment to follow through. They're also looking for something that's technological feasible, right? Something that you can really see with your own hands, that you can touch and see like, and you can track this through like very clear milestones. And I think we can actually deliver in all of this. Also, we are very fortunate actually to have top, biotech, food tech VCs that also have a good, I'll say like patient kind of capital. The space we are, it's very regulated, right? So it's not like developing softwares that you can try here and there. You got to do lots of like preclinical studies to build up your capacity, to show what you're doing is actually really safe, that you can move to the next step. So these things, it's not something that happens like, it takes some time to, see those things mature. And we got, pretty solid investors to back that up as you see, like for the portfolio investors we have. I think that's coming back to answer your question, right? I think the reasons we have for institutional investors to be backing the company from the get-go is the same reasons we see like retail investors coming through the WeFounder platform to invest in the company.
And when I was discovering kind of your company, I think at first I saw it like a CPG company. And then the more I dig into it, I realized, no, it's not a CPG deal. We're on a biotech company. And as you say, that's why you kind of require some sort of patient capital.
Yeah.
But when I looked into it even more, I feel that an aspect of Harmony is also some sort of a climate company. And one of the reasons for that is that when you make formula using cow milk, you just have to have that, intensive co-farming. You have cows that are producing methane, that are consuming resources, that are emitting CO2 and greenhouse gases. And when you switch it to producing in-lab proteins, and you just are dedicated to producing the protein directly, and you don't have to have the entire farm and the all cows and everything that comes along that. I'm wondering, are you truly more efficient from greenhouse gas perspective, from a land usage perspective, biodiversity perspective? Do you feel like you also can have a positive climate impact?
That's interesting because full transparency, when we start working on Harmony, the environmental impact came as some sort of like a positive side effect of this. But the answer is yes. Let me get you some numbers, right? For you to make 1 kilogram of baby formula, you're going to spend about 7 liters of water and about 9 kilograms of CO2. You're going to put that in a space. So it's pretty heavy on the environmental impact kind of situation because it's based on cow's milk. And so all the drivers through the dairy industry is the same kind of drivers you have for baby formulas, because baby formulas are a byproduct of the dairy industry. When we replace that for the real milk, the human milk components made by precision fermentation, you're cutting off that part of the value chain and using a totally different pathway to produce this kind of product. So not only impact the health status of an infant, but also impact the health status of the planet, because we don't need to use the same value chain to produce a superior product. So it's quite impressive when we think about this, right? Kind of no-brainer action. And yeah.
Amazing. Anything else you would like to?
I didn't hear a question. Can you say that again?
Anything you would like to add?
Yeah. Well, I think I would like to add that the things we're doing within the company goes like through baby steps. And there is a big transformation that we're up to. We can feel this momentum, Leah. It's very interesting. If you get closer, you're going to see this, like how things are progressing in a way that's quite disruptive. If you check on the scientific advisory board we have, boy, out of the maybe 10 most famous researchers in this space, we have at least 5, 6, maybe 7 supporting Harmony in some capacity. It's not because of like I'm always saying this, like my sexy accent. No, it's because there is a major disruption behind the things that's going on. In every serious researcher, human being, and business person in this industry, they kind of craving for something, for a change. Another thing that's important to highlight, the way we operate in the business, we always saying this, we are not in this game for scale. We are in the game of disruption. If you see product by product, we introduce innovation, real innovation that changes that particular area. So in the beginning, generation 1 and 2, we go for this more niche market, right? Products are heavily science-based, that we can talk with the medical community. We can pull up like lots of science to kind of showcase the science we're doing. But when we move into products like generation 3 those are the real breakthrough. Because with a single product, you can support not only unhealthy babies, like allergic babies, but also healthy babies with a single shot, which is really impressive, like breast milk does. There is no breast milk for allergic and healthy babies. It's the same thing. So this is the kind of disruption we can see in this industry, and why we're saying we don't need to be like a multi-million-dollar revenue generating machine to kind of be worth $1 billion, be like $1 billion company. We just need to keep moving innovation across the line.